Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, in this video, we're going to be removing this factory output transformer and going to be installing the second one of these Hashimoto HC-203U single-ended output transformers. And if you didn't see the last videos, you should probably go watch that. We do some testing on this versus this, show what a huge upgrade it is. So I'm going to show you how to remove one of these cans, how to modify the top of the chassis. You know, since I've done one, maybe how to avoid a close call I had with it. This could have been a big fail, but I got lucky. But I'll show you that in the video and what I've learned about how to do this so you won't have problems, and then how to wire these up, because there's a bunch of wires coming out of it. Some of them we use, some of them we don't. And then also going to do some tuning on the negative feedback loop that this amp has to try to tame some of the oscillations that we're seeing on the 10K square wave with this transformer. And then going to do some listening with both, you know, maybe do one channel with and without the tuning, and then report back on what the final result is. So let's get busy fixing this R300. Okay, so let me kind of go over what we did removing the headphone jack wiring, which we did in the R8, and I think it's a good idea to do in any of these amps if you're not going to be using the headphones. And to me, it seems pretty silly to be using an amplifier with a ton of power to drive a pair of headphones anyway. So you come up here to the front of the amp. Let me spin this guy around. Come up here to the front of the amp and you just cut all these wires going to the circuit board on the headphone jack and pull them out. And then here in this back corner, all these headphone jack wires come over here, and some of them are soldered to the earth ground going to your wall socket, which is not a good idea. And some of them also come over here to the chassis ground point that's also connected to the earth ground. So what you want to do is cut all the wires that are going to this chassis ground except for the one wire that you're going to pull up here and connect to the earth ground. And you want this safety ground to be the only wire that's coming down here and connecting to the chassis at this point right here. Now you can see over here we added another solder lug here. This was off of a speaker jack that I wouldn't use it anymore, but anything like this that you can solder a wire to and bolt down to the chassis. And we cleaned all the paint off so it gets a good solid ground. Okay, this wire runs up here, and this is the ground, the main ground, and it comes up here to this ground lug on this capacitor, because this is where all the ground wires are now going to connect. So you have a ground, like I said, that goes directly from here to the chassis back here. You have another one that comes from this point over here to this ground on the board right here. This ground and this ground are internally connected with a trace down this board. So you only need to ground it on this end up here and run this over to the big cap. Now there's another thing labeled ground here. The only thing you're grounding is this 470K resistor from this choke point to ground, and we don't need this. The amp has other resistors that'll bleed off the voltage, so you don't need to connect either one of these grounds. Just connect this one up here in the front, over here to this capacitor. So we're going to come over here and look at some other grounds. Coming off of this ground point is also a ground wire that goes up to the front of the amp to the bias board. Then you have another ground lead that you're going to run from here, and I believe this one's already wired in the amp, that runs from here to here. And this is the center tap of the high voltage AC on the power transformer. And then there's another ground wire right here that again was connected from the factory that runs up to the bias board for the other channel that's connected to this ground point here, which is fine. So you got the center tap of the high voltage connected to this ground, which is the ground for both of the caps that we've got in the power supply. And then again, got a wire here that runs over to this ground. And then you've got the other ground wire from this point running back here to this chassis ground. And the other thing you have to do is you're going to be grounding both of these negative speaker terminals to this same ground point here. And that's the return path for the global negative feedback. Plus it's a safety thing in case the output transformer has an internal short. You don't have to worry about it because it will blow the fuse. Now from the factory there was some ground stuff connected here. Just throw all that away. Don't need any of that. So basically you're grounding to this star ground point both the negative speaker jacks, this ground point over here on this board, and then running a ground wire over here to this point. And then up here to the center tap of the transformer, and then make sure both of, let me spin the amp around and show you these. There's one right here, and then there's another one right here. Those both need a ground that comes back here, and then there's another ground that comes up here to the front end, and you know, that's all grounded. As long as you have this terminal grounded, the rest of these grounds will all be in place. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm not going to take this amp back apart and redo these grounding mods just to show you how to do it. I think you can figure it out from that. So when we put the new transformer in, we hook the negative wire from the transformer directly to the speaker jack. And then this is the 4 ohm, which is gray. The blue wire is the 8 ohm. The green wire is the 16 ohm. And right here, and then underneath this capacitor is another connection like this on this side that, I don't know if you can, I think you can see it up underneath there, underneath that cap. Those are for the negative feedback, and that wire is run down here, and that's what this yellow wire is right here. That's the global negative feedback, and it's hooked up to the 16 ohm. So I'm going to show you now how to do the transformer on the other channel. So the first thing you need to do is to get this out of your way, because the transformer wiring is underneath this circuit board. So we take these two screws out, then you can lift this board up like this and get it out of your way, and then you can see that's the output transformer turret. Now if you use one of those ISO Tango type potted transformers, it will have a turret on it like this, and you would connect the wires that are existing in the amp to the connections on the output transformer. And see, here's the 16 ohm guy that's going to the feedback loop, and we're going to have to move it over here to the speaker jack with this installation. This red wire is the positive from the power supply. This blue wire goes to the output tube. But we're going to be removing this wire and just run the wire off the bottom of the transformer over to the tube. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and get our soldering iron warmed up, and we're going to disconnect these wires over here at the speaker jacks, because we've got wires coming out of this new transformer that will connect directly to those speaker jacks. So let me get my soldering iron all ready, and we'll come back and unsolder all of this stuff and unsolder the other wires and get ready to wire up this new transformer after we install it. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is deal with this blue wire here that goes up, well, and of course I got two different blue wires here, which makes things nice and confusing. We need to go ahead and cut some of these gazillion wire ties that they put inside these things. Be careful you don't want to cut any of the wires or cut the insulation while you're removing all these wire ties that are coming back here to this tube socket, because we're going to be unsoldering the blue wire from the tube socket so we can directly run the wire from the transformer to the tube socket. So we get this blue wire here, and it's coming up to this socket pin, and go ahead and unsolder this thing. Come in here and heat this up and pull this blue wire out back to there like that. Now I'm going to clip this red wire, because we're probably not going to have enough length on this transformer lead to go all the way across over to here. So we're going to be splicing it somewhere along in here, but let's go ahead and just get this one loose. Then let's go ahead and unsolder this yellow wire here. Get that loose right there. And we may end up having to splice them. No, I do think this is going to be long enough to come back here to the speaker jack. So, got that unsoldered. Now we're going to come in here and we're going to unsolder all these wires coming to these speaker terminals. And these take a little while to heat up and get the solder melted in here to get the wire out, so just be patient. Might help to just feed a little solder in there to get a little flux going, get a nice thermal transfer here to get those loose. There's that one. And watch out, those things are hot. You definitely will burn your finger on them. And try not to roast these wires while you're doing this. And you could just cut these wires and then try to unsolder the old one and then solder the new one on at the same time while the terminal's still kind of warm. It's probably a smart thing to do. And then this was originally the ground from the transformer that ran all the way around the amp up to the headphone jack, which I've already disabled when I did the first transformer. So your amp might look slightly different on where the wires are going, but trying to get this stuff all disconnected before we pull the transformer out. Like that. And I think that's all of our, there's all of our transformer wires. And then we got that one disconnected. Now we're ready to remove the transformer. And there are 4 Phillips head screws that hold these in. And you just take these 4 screws out. And they're these super giant long screws. They're about 2 inches longer than they need to be. Turn our soldering iron off. We're done with that for now. Get that screw out. And there we go. Got the output transformer undone. If you hadn't seen, let me show you what the inside of this looks like. And there's what the inside of the output transformer can looks like. It's got a huge chunk of epoxy, and this one actually, the epoxy split right there. It looks like it's got maybe a bunch of gravel thrown in there with it, kind of as filler. I don't know, these are junk. These are going in the trash can. So let me flip the amp over and we'll start showing you how to modify the top side to mount these new transformers. Okay, sadly the video I recorded with the transformer not mounted to show you the holes in how I mounted this thing got corrupted, and to re-record that I'd have to unsolder all the wires and unscrew the transformer and all that, and I'm not doing that. So let me just explain what I did. These front holes, you have to slot them wider because the screw spacing is wider on this transformer than the old cans. So I used a dremel tool and slotted these holes out, and then in the back you just center punch the holes and drill them. Drill a hole down here for the grommet, Install the grommet, run the wires through. I mean, there's several different ways you could do this. Instead of trying to slot these with a Dremel tool, you could mount this over this way a little bit. Use the original hole in the front here, and then just drill a new hole on this side. That would move the transformer over this way a little bit. The problem that you're going to run into is not with this one on the left side. It's the one on the right side. There's a stand and the choke that limit where you can put the rear holes. And you have to be aware of that when you're mounting the one on the right hand side. Be very careful about where you're drilling the holes. I ended up, instead of drilling a complete through hole in the rear mounting points of the right hand transformer, I drilled about a 1/8 inch hole and used a self-tapping or sheet metal type screw to hold down the rear 2 points on the transformer because there was nowhere to put a nut on the underside. Possibly you could move the transformer back and use the rear holes and not run into that problem. But then, the transformer's going to be, sitting way back and look kind of goofy and have these holes left in the front. So I think this is a better solution, mounting it up forward. And let me zoom out just a little bit. And to me, this looks nice. But again, this one on this side, you need to be really attentive on these rear holes and, the stuff that's on the inside that could interfere with being able to attach the rear of this transformer. So from the back side, it's going to leave a couple of holes here, which, again, if it's sitting on a shelf, you're not going to see these because they're behind the transformer. And then we run the wires for the secondary side of the output transformer through the big square hole that the original transformer turret went through, and then just drill 2 new holes here. And then on the other side, same thing, but these are smaller drilled and these are self-tapping or sheet metal screws on this side because, again, there was no room on the inside to put nuts. So, like I said, just kind of study this when you're getting ready to mount this transformer on this side, because there are some things on the inside that are going to interfere with those mounting holes. So now that we got these mounted, let me show you the wiring on the inside. Okay, so here's the bundle of wires that are coming through the grommet from the transformer, and we're not going to use the white, orange, or the yellow. And so we're going to trim them off about this long, put some heat shrink tubing on them, kind of stagger cut them, and put a heat shrink over the whole bundle of them, and then just a little zip tie over here to this, under this little screw standoff. You can see where I did this over here, and that just gets these wires we're not going to be using out of the way. There is enough length on this brown wire that is the B+ positive high voltage DC wire going to the output transformer, that I can bring it over here and just solder it onto this connection on this tag strip. That this early version power supply, we created this little tag strip over here with these dropping resistors. If you've got a different version of amp, and honestly, I can't remember what they all are and how they're different. Some of them have the choke hooking up to this board. Whatever you've got, wherever the red positive for the old transformer, you hook to this brown wire. And whether you can pull it over here and solder it, directly, or if you need to cut them and splice them, put some heat shrink tubing on them, either one of those methods will work fine. On the speaker wires, the black is the ground, and it's going to go to this ground lead. And then, again, we have a ground that goes from the speaker jack up to the negative of this cap. Then the green wire is the 16 ohm. It goes to this outboard terminal, and then we bring this yellow wire here that goes over to the global feedback loop. It connects also to the 16 ohm speaker terminal. Blue is the 8 ohm, gray is the 4 ohm. So let me get all these wires connected up, and get this connected over here to the tube, and this run over here to our high voltage DC. Screw down this little circuit board to these two standoffs, and we'll be done installing the transformers. Okay, so let me show you this all soldered up and neatened up. You can see here we got these wires that come up through the hole that used to be for the turret for the output transformer. These are the wires from the secondary. They come over here. You got the green 16 ohm with the yellow that goes up to the global feedback. There's the 8 ohm, 4 ohm, the ground. Then the other side of this ground comes up here to the star ground or negative side of that big cap. Then this will just sit back down in here like that when we're done. Then the red wire comes around here and is soldered up to this pin on the 300B tube. And then the brown wire comes along here and is connected up to this side of this tag strip. And again, multiple different versions of these power supplies that need different solutions to fix the problem of having too big a first capacitor at the rectifier tubes that was causing them to blow rectifier tubes. In this solution, the B plus comes over here. It goes through these two dropping resistors to this point. And just so you understand that this is on the same side as this giant cap, so that this is the reservoir for the current going to the positive side of the output transformers. So it's not like the resistors are like limiting what can go through the output transformers. It's got this giant cap here to help when you have like a bass slam or something like that. It will pull the current out of this big cap. And these resistors here just keep the voltage dropped so that we're not super overvolting these 300B tubes. And again, I really don't understand why they did a fixed bias when they've got so much voltage on the plate of this tube. And when I go to work on the other amp that I have here, it might be next summer before I get to that, but when I work on fixing this R300 and deal with sorting out all this wiring here on the front end that is causing the distortion and not enough current to drive these 300B tubes to full power, when I fix this problem, I'm probably going to cathode bias these and get rid of these bias boards because the amp just doesn't need them. But anyway, that's wiring up the output transformers. The only thing left I have to do is, this is the resistor for the feedback loop, and I need to parallel different size capacitors across here to try to tame the high frequency oscillations we were seeing on the 10K square wave. So I'm going to deal with that, and then I'm probably just going to do one channel and leave the other one alone, and then listen to the amp. The other thing that this amp had originally was it had a film cap going across this big output cap, and I want to listen to the amp with and without that and see if it helps or hurts the way the amp sounds. Here was the cap that this owner bought to put in here, and I can solder that back across there and just see what it sounds like. But I'm not a real big fan of bypassing caps, and I think it's kind of a fad that some people like the way they sound. I found that it makes a lot of amps kind of shrill sounding, so we're going to play with and without it and see what that sounds like. And we'll do one final video on the feedback loop tuning and what this film cap across this big cap sounds like. And I think this is a good place to wrap up this video. Well, here's what the finished upgraded amp looks like, and I actually think it looks good. These transformers look great, and they got a really cool little label on the top of them to let you know there's something special going on. And definitely sounds huge improvement. Now I still need to play around a little bit with the feedback loop tuning. Normally on a 300B amp, there's no feedback loop. So yeah, that's probably part of why it's acting a little weird, is they've got a feedback loop because of the weak front end design. And if I told y'all I hate this amp, I mean, the R8 had some issues, but it wasn't like just a total disaster. But there's just nothing redeeming about this amp. It's got 2 rectifier tubes you gotta buy that you only need one, and it's, you know, trying to fake people out into thinking it's got some kind of a special power supply when the power supply design is a disaster. It's got junk output transformers that don't work at all. I mean, the little, what is it, probably $800, maybe $900 now, Rysong A50's got better iron than this has. And this is being hyped and pitched as some kind of premium product where you're getting way more than $1,500. And at the end of the day, you're going to end up paying $1,500 for a chassis and a moderately okay power transformer. So anyway, I'm tired of messing with this thing, and like I said, I've still got a little bit of work to do on the feedback loop, trying to tame the high frequency kind of weirdness that it's got, but it's probably fine the way it is. I guess the bottom line at this point, if you do this transformer upgrade and you fix the power supply, as long as you need under 4 watts of power, leaving a little bit for headroom, this amp's probably okay. But so is an EL34 amp. A Rysong A12 will do what this does, and with Skokie mods, it's a $500 amp. And so, and it uses, you know, under $20 tubes. That's the problem with a 300B amp, is good tubes are going to be $700 or $800 for a pair. Anyway, the facts and measurements speak for themselves. I don't need to say anything more about this amp. Yeah, it is what it is. And it's time to move on to something else. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the series, enjoyed these videos. If you have, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you folks that watch my channel and give me other forms of support so we can all learn more about how to enjoy hi-fi on a budget. And until the next video, have a nice day.